The Chiefs spent a second-round draft pick on one of the most disruptive interior pass rushers in college football, and he flashed that ability almost immediately in the NFL, but then he got hurt. And now, after Kansas City spent a first-round pick on defensive tackle Peter Woods, it feels like everyone's all but forgotten about Omarr Norman-Lott.
Most important player, maybe in the whole draft, like we'll see if Josh Simmons starts, but like right now is Norman-Lott because there's just such a need for defensive tackle snaps to be eaten up.
But what if we're looking at this completely backward? What if Peter Woods wasn't drafted to replace Omarr Norman-Lott or even take him off the field? What if his versatility actually helps Omarr Norman-Lott get on the field more? Because the Chiefs may now have the ability to put a package together where Omarr Norman-Lott, Peter Woods, Chris Jones, and George Karlaftis can all rush the passer at the same time. And if Norman-Lott comes back healthy, the forgotten player on this defensive line could become its biggest wild card. Before the injury, there's a reason the Chiefs were so excited about him. Kansas City selected Norman-Lott with the 63rd pick overall in the second round of the 2025 NFL Draft. And at first, some people questioned the value. Norman-Lott had never even been a full-time defensive lineman with the Tennessee Volunteers. He played in a pretty deep rotation there. So because of that, the traditional production didn't immediately jump off the page. But the Chiefs were looking deeper. Because when Norman-Lott was given the opportunities to rush the passer, he was one of the most efficient interior defensive linemen in the entire country. During the 2024 season, Norman-Lott generated 27 QB pressures on only 139 pass rushing snaps. He finished second on Tennessee's defense in total pressures, but only came in 20th when it came to total defensive snaps. And according to the Chiefs, Norman-Lott led the entire FBS in pass rush win rate and pass rush win percentage. And that is what Kansas City was betting on. Not volume, not a massive collection of statistics, but disruption. The Chiefs believe if they could take one of the country's most effective interior pass rushers and stick them beside Chris Jones, that eventually they'd be able to create all kinds of havoc in the middle of offenses. And that's an important distinction to make. Because Omarr Norman-Lott wasn't even drafted to be an every down nose tackle type player. He was drafted because he could get upfield. He could attack gaps. He could use his quickness and explosiveness to attack offensive linemen before they even got set and comfortable. The Chiefs saw a specialized skill that could become extremely valuable in Steve Spagnuolo's defense. Now, if you're getting any value out of today's video, do us a favor and hit the like button. We're trying to get to 500. Now back to the show. Unfortunately, Omarr Norman-Lott's rookie season didn't give us enough time to see how valuable that skill was. His development was interrupted before the regular season even began. Norman-Lott suffered an ankle injury during the Chiefs' first padded practice of training camp. That cost him valuable preparation time, affected his preseason, and kept him from playing in Kansas City's opener. But when he finally made his NFL debut in Week 2 against the Philadelphia Eagles, we all got a flash of exactly why Kansas City drafted this guy. Norman-Lott got into the backfield and made a sick sack on Jalen Hurts that made everybody jump up out of their seats. In his first NFL game, against the defending Super Bowl champions, after missing valuable time during training camp. But that didn't mean that Norman-Lott had arrived. Just one sack doesn't prove that a player is going to become a star in the league. But it did show that the trait that Kansas City was drafting had translated. The quickness was there. The ability to penetrate from the interior, that was there too. And Norman-Lott went on to earn his place in the rotation of the defensive line. But then, unfortunately, the injuries continued. A shoulder injury cost him another game. He returned to the field, but in Kansas City's Week 7 victory against the Las Vegas Raiders, Omarr Norman-Lott tore his freaking ACL. His rookie season was over. 1 sack and only 72 defensive snaps. And that's just not enough football to determine what Omarr Norman-Lott could become. But it was enough time for him to generate 6 QB pressures. And this is where Norman-Lott's rookie season starts to look a lot more interesting than those basic numbers make it appear. Because the most important thing that he showed may not have been that sack against Jalen Hurts. It may have been about how his specific ability could change the opportunities for everyone around him. And that's where I think all the conversation around Omarr Norman-Lott has become somewhat unfair because people remember that his season ended early. They remember that he got hurt. They remember that Kansas City went right back in the first round of the next draft and got another defensive tackle. But they may not remember what Omarr Norman-Lott was starting to show before that injury. He wasn't dominating every week. Hell, he wasn't even a finished product. And he definitely had parts of his game that still needed to be developed. But in an extremely limited amount of opportunities, Norman-Lott flashed the exact ability that Kansas City was comfortable drafting in the second round. He could create pressure from the interior. And Chiefs fans know best because of Stone Cold Chris Jones, but pressure from the interior changes a defense. When an edge rusher wins, the quarterback may be able just to step up into the pocket. But when a defensive tackle wins, that pocket completely collapses. The quarterback loses the space directly in front of him, and he may be forced to move before the routes have even developed. He might have to throw from an uncomfortable platform, and most of the time, that interior defender don't even have to finish the sack. He can force the quarterback directly into the path of an edge rusher. And that sounds really good when you got a closer like R. Mason Thomas on the team now. And all of that becomes a lot more valuable when the guy beside Norman-Lott is Chris Jones. Every offense that plays the Kansas City Chiefs start their protection plan with one question in mind. How do we stop Chris Jones? Do we double team him? Do we slide the protection in his direction? Do we keep extra help available? And every additional resource that an offense commits to Chris Jones opens up a one-on-one opportunity for someone else. And I feel like the Chiefs have been searching forever for some guys that can actually cash in on those opportunities. Norman-Lott was drafted by the Chiefs because they thought eventually he could become one of those guys. And before we get to the part of the defense that can make Norman-Lott even more dangerous, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. All right, back to it, because now there's another major piece in this equation, Peter Woods. At first glance, Peter Woods may appear to be somewhat of a problem for Omarr Norman-Lott. Kansas City already had a young defensive tackle recovering from an injury. Then the Chiefs used the 29th pick overall of the 2026 draft to select a defensive tackle. Peter Woods has first round status. Omarr Norman-Lott coming off of a torn ACL. And if we look at a traditional depth chart, it's easy to think that those two players are going to be competing for snaps. But the beauty of it is, Peter Woods is not limited to one spot. His ability to play inside as a defensive tackle and kick out to play the defensive end position gives Steve Spagnuolo lots of options.
Shout out to Prize Picks. Tonight, instead of doing an entry, we're going to go back and look at something we actually won a little bit. $3 to win $51. This was a 6-pick power play. We took two tennis players, Sarandulo and Golubic, both to win break points. They both hit. Caitlin Clark, WNBA. We picked her more, 14.5 points. That was a solid win. We also picked Sophie Cunningham and Paige Buchers to go more on 1.53 points made and 9.5 rebounds and assist totals with Bucher. We hit on both of those. And then last but not least, Yamamoto, Dodgers pitcher. We took him more at 5.5 strikeouts and he hit. If you want to follow along with us more during the season or maybe even before the football season, head down to the description, download Prize Picks, use code HMA. Steve, back to the show.
And instead of taking Omarr Norman-Lott off the field, that's now going to create some situations where you might be able to have both of those young, really good pass rushers on the field at the same time. And this is where the entire conversation changes. Because if Woods can go outside and be just as dangerous, then the Chiefs may never have to make the decision on which one of their young defensive tackles they want to use more. They could easily create a package that forces offenses to figure out how to deal with all of them at one time. I'm talking Peter Woods, Omarr Norman-Lott, Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, and maybe even R. Mason Thomas if we slate them in at linebacker. That's 5. Yes, 5 talented pass rushers on the field at one time. That's going to be a lot for offenses to handle. And the most interesting part is all the different ways that Steve Spagnuolo would be able to arrange them. The Chiefs could potentially show one front and then attack from a completely different alignment after the offense has already set its protection. Now, to be completely clear, the Chiefs haven't alluded to having this 4-man front, but we also don't know exactly how Steve Spagnuolo plans to use Peter Woods. And before Norman-Lott can be a part of any package, he has to prove that he's healthy and ready to go. But that personnel, that creates a fascinating possibility. And that possibility is why viewing Peter Woods as competition for Omarr Norman-Lott could be all wrong. Woods being on the team doesn't necessarily block the path for Omarr Norman-Lott to be on the field. His versatility could create a path for both of them. And if that happens, Norman-Lott would not have to become something that he's never been before. He doesn't have to put in 700 snaps a season. He doesn't have to become a primary run defender in the interior. And he'll never have to replace Chris Jones. He could just focus on the skill that made him a second-round draft pick in the first place. That may very well be the best way to bring Norman-Lott back from a serious knee injury. Kansas City now has enough talent and versatility on that defensive line where he doesn't have to come back into a forced, oversized role. Woods can contribute in multiple alignments. Chris Jones remains the centerpiece of that defensive front. George Karlaftis is already an established part of the pass rush. And Norman-Lott could become that specialized interior pass rusher that comes into the game when the situation is designed to maximize his explosiveness. 3rd and long, 2-minute situations, obvious passing downs, moments when the offense is already focused on Chris Jones, and creates one-on-one matchups for Norman-Lott. That role may not produce the highest snap count for Norman-Lott, but it could produce some of the most important ones. And it could help the Chiefs manage the workload of Chris Jones. Jones has carried an enormous amount of responsibility for this defensive line for many years now. Every offense focuses on him. Every protection plan accounts for him. And for a long time now, Kansas City has needed young players that could get in there beside him and create pressure and alleviate some of it from Jones. Peter Woods gives the Chiefs another premium talent, but a healthy Norman-Lott could give them something that they barely had the opportunity to utilize last season. A second interior pass rusher that's capable of attacking the pocket quickly. And if both of these young guys develop, Kansas City may have an opportunity to make waves on that defensive front and take a huge burden off the shoulders of Chris Jones. That right there is what makes Omarr Norman-Lott so intriguing for this upcoming season. There is still a risk though. A torn ACL is a major injury for any of these guys. And Norman-Lott's game depends heavily on explosiveness, leverage, and the ability to generate force from the ground. We can't just assume that he'll immediately return as the same player. We also can't take his 6 pressures and 72 snaps from last year and project it out over an entire season and expect him to hit that mark. That would be unfair. Norman-Lott just needs to prove that he can stay healthy and he can develop against the run. He has to earn his role in a defensive line room that has become more talented and more competitive. But there's an enormous difference in saying that Omarr Norman-Lott still has something to prove and that the Chiefs have just moved on from him already. And that's why it's kind of strange to me that it seems that he's already become an afterthought for a lot of Chiefs Kingdom. I mean, I get it. Peter Woods is the new first-round draft pick. He's automatically going to garner a lot of attention. Chris Jones is still the superstar, and Norman-Lott is that injured second-year player that disappeared from the lineup before anybody really got to see what he's all about. But sometimes the most important development is not of the player that everyone's discussing. Sometimes it's about the player that quietly returns to a better situation than the one that he left. Norman-Lott now has another versatile defensive lineman beside him, and that will make him have a more clearly defined role. And if he comes back healthy, Kansas City may be able to utilize that special skill that he has without asking him to do much of anything else. Peter Woods does not have to replace Norman-Lott. He might actually help unlock him. And if Spags can find a way to implement that NASCAR package, especially with R. Mason as a linebacker, that could be a pretty nasty wrinkle for the defense. 5 talented pass rushers that can move all around the formation and make it very difficult for offenses to set their protection. That right there, that's the potential. But nothing works unless Norman-Lott can get healthy and take that next step. So here's what I want to know. Which one of these young defensive linemen do you think will make the biggest impact in this upcoming season? Do you think it'll be Omarr Norman-Lott or Peter Woods? And if Norman-Lott does return healthy, do you think the Chiefs should just use him as a specialized interior pass rusher, or should they try to let him earn a bigger role in the defense? And if you're more worried about the offensive line than the defensive line, check this video out right here. It might ease that anxiety just a little bit for you.